unfortunately, within the first 72 hours, we had some pretty tricky stuff to deal with, and we were deployed to the oil fields with Americans because they didn't have our expertise, and we were checking for all the booby traps on the oil rigs. We were clearing the main arterial routes, and we were thrusting right into Iraq, and our guys were right at the front. And in the first 72 hours, I lost 2 guys in an ambush, killed in an ambush, and the impact of that was significant because one of them was Simon Cullingworth, a very experienced and capable soldier, but also bomb disposal operator. He was a warrant officer, and his young driver with him was a great lad as well, and Sapper also. And they were both killed. And what happened was, to make it worse, was we had to deal with that, and the regiment was dealing with it quite well. But for some reason, intelligence had come back to Tony Blair that they'd been executed. And I was following the protocol and policy in a document that we have, how you deal with fatalities in the regiment and how the process is dealt with. And at the time, we couldn't find the bodies. We found them subsequently, a couple of weeks later. They were buried in blankets in his pit of waste ground. But the Prime Minister had been wrongly briefed by his team that they'd been executed. And that had a massive effect on my regiment, the morale. Great friends, dear friends, killed in action, simple as that. And I wanted to keep it at that. Because there was no evidence to prove that otherwise happened. It was hearsay. But when Tony Blair got up with George Bush in the US and gave some reasons as to why we're in Iraq, and he then said, and look what else has happened, Saddam's men have now executed 2 British soldiers in cold blood. And that was across all the TVs. And I had to go and deal with the families at that point. I had to come back, sort the families out, and try and restore normality and tell them why and what was going on. And I absolutely refused to agree with the Prime Minister at that point because no one had put it in writing. And in the policy documents that the CO had, it said there are various formats that you had to follow on notification, etc. And one of the lines was, you must follow fact. So I spoke to the powers be and said, well, I would like that in writing, please. And I was told, don't be so bloody bureaucratic, go around and tell them now, because the press are saying, were they executed, weren't they executed? And I'm saying, well, you put it in writing, you send it to me, and I'll go around and tell them. This was at 2 o'clock in the morning. With that, the press turned up at the barracks, hundreds of them outside. So we took them biscuits and tea, and I dealt with the family the night before. The families had then said to the media, we believe Colonel Tony, we don't believe the Prime Minister, we're going with what he says. And I dealt with the press, and I said to them, I'm not here to question the judgment of the Prime Minister, far be it. All I'm saying is, as far as I'm concerned, from the information that I've been given, my soldiers were killed in action. They were killed in action, and until we get further information and fact, I am going to leave it at that. I would like you all to respect that the families have now lost their loved ones, and they need a bit of peace and space to deal with this tragedy. And also, we're still at war, and I have some very valuable men with families back here who need to be looked after and supported. And left it at that. Well, I went back, and this got me in a lot of trouble. But my line was, and I thought long and hard about it, and I had a vicar, local vicar in Debden, who's a fantastic guy, and he said to me, he said, so Tony, what do you make of this? I said, well, professionally and morally, I'm on the high ground, and that's all I worry about. Professionally and morally, I'm on the high ground because I was right. And subsequently, and all, fair dues to Tony Blair, he wrote me a letter of apology, saying he'd been wrongly briefed because the pathologist's report showed that they were killed. One of them died a little later than the ambush, but they were killed by injuries sustained there. Now, subsequently, I do believe people have been brought to court in Iraq for this incident. So I don't know what's going to happen on that, but all I can say is I followed at the time exactly what I've been briefed. And, of course, you're not too bothered about other people. What you're trying to do is look after your own. And Mrs. Collingworth, I know, still has nightmares and things like that about this execution statement and various things like that. And I don't think the media and others understand how, you know, how much influence they have and how wrong it can be. And all of the good we were doing in Iraq, schools were getting school uniforms, Bedouins were going to school, electricity, power and all that was going to, but you wouldn't hear any of that. You want to know that. And that was an interesting lesson for me.